Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, as I said. I think Norman, one of my friends, and Dr. Frischler Bethel introduced me to them. Alex told me he knows that I have a problem. He doesn't know, but Dr. Bethel knows that I have off mainstream in terms of the way I see things. I'm somewhat critical of many establishments, including establishment in Iran, and sometimes I have been a little harsh on different approaches to humanity. But at the same time, I have learned from many people like you that regardless of challenges that we face, the most important key is to see the people even who commit crimes against us as the member of human family. It's easier to say than to do, but at least this is what we strive. And I see people who are here, in fact, doing it in action, including Norman and Dr. Bethel, who introduced me here. Now, I have a few presentations. Shahi's seen some of them. Thank you for being here. I will start with just reading the text of the patient that I will discuss, and then I have the presentation. If time remains, I will come back to the case in form of slides. And I also have a presentation from the perspective of a little dog that I have, how he sees the world. So it's made it for children, but it may be interesting for you as an entertainment. I would like to, again, thank Dr. Alex Riazati and his associate at Human in the Making Foundation for organizing this event and for inviting me. By the way, when I look at the Human in the Making, there are a few things came to my mind. I thought I made 2 humans about 20 years ago, and I have forgotten how to make humans. So maybe I learn again. But in fact, it's a beautiful concept. In fact, we are, although we are grown up, but frankly, in terms of humanity, we all have flaws and deficiencies, and this is a way to make us think about what is really human and how could we become human, all of us. I am a practicing physician first and a mental health specialist next. As such, I try to understand and alleviate the suffering of patients with a keen interest in humanity. Gandhi, my spiritual role model for humanity, once said that humans ought to avoid 7 sins to remain humans. These sins include wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, without character, commerce without morality, worship without sacrifice, politics without principle, and science without humanity. I think what is common between us here is the hope to avoid such social sins by learning and sharing what we have learned. What I have learned is taking care of patients. And now I would like to share the history of a symbolic patient that has occupied my mind for decades. The patient's name is Rojin. She suffers from a deep pain and needs help. She has been denied various opportunities and therefore remains underdeveloped. She is fearful, helpless, and unable to make her own decision. In order to understand her pain, a review of her background is essential. Her origin goes back to her mother, the royal media. After a bad fall, media became bedridden and lived in poverty for many years. She then met a conservative, influential, and expansive married man. This man's slogan was taking care of the poor and the widows. Being a poor widow, media had submitted and married him. Her husband had been a passionate man at times and a violent one at other times. Media was abused, remained poor, and died poor, despite her marriage to an influential and polygamous husband. Being exposed to abuse and discrimination, some of Media's children retreated to the mountain to fight injustice. To their credit, they did not fight anyone who was not fighting them. While in the mountains, most of them missed the opportunity to be educated and work in industrial and cultural centers. Many fell behind in terms of scientific, philosophical, political, and artistic accomplishments. Some even accepted submission, assimilation, dogmatism, and gender discrimination as new norms. Some of them saw their mother and her sisters as strangers. Rojin had 3 sisters. After the loss of their parents, Rojin and her sister had inherited a large property with rich natural resources. The property was managed by their negligent husband and remained deficient in terms of modern infrastructure and industries. It is said that the husband had deliberately let the properties remain underdeveloped in order to safeguard the power structure of the family. Rojin's husband had manipulated Rojin and her children to serve the dysfunctional, patriarchal family structure. Through favoritism, some of the children have accepted subservience and focused on pitiful rivalry instead of fighting violence, exploitation, and neglect. Instead of promoting knowledge, science, and culture, some of them have become preoccupied with unreasonable rituals, superstition, and empty promises of going to heaven upon submission. After a bad fall, her father and the ruler of another territory, after a fight between her father and the ruler of another territory, Rojin's sister and their inherited lands were given away to the winning ruler. So the first border was created between Rojin and her sisters. Years later, in a similar fight, the husband of the 3 sisters promised them to let them free. Within a few years, the promise was broken. 2 of the sisters and their inheritance were given away to 2 twin brothers. Now the sisters were further divided and lived in 4 controlled territories. They remained separated from each other and were controlled by abusive husbands. One of the games of the husband was giving happy promises to their wives and competing over betraying and abusing them. Fed up with pain, Rojin gave up her hope of relying on empty promises, and with the support of one of her sons, she decided to be free once. Her freedom lasted less than a year. Her husband found her and her son, hanged the son in public, and paralyzed her via a head trauma. Now she's almost mute. She has some active and hopeful children though. It has been difficult for Rojin to get anywhere. She cannot freely express what she wants. She has to follow an imposed fate, learn a different language, and accept any identity that is given to her. She has tried to settle with her husband, but often been betrayed and at times badly hurt on the negotiation table. Despite her hardship, she remains flexible, tolerant, open, friendly, and looks for a peaceful solution. She is hopeful as she sees that one of her sisters has made some progress. The sister once screamed so loud that the world heard her cry and luckily rescued her. The sister now has a better opportunity to make her own decisions. Rojin hopes to have the same opportunity. She is gradually being heard, if not by everyone, at least by some friends who try to avoid social sins. She hopes that the people in this audience were such friends and will support her in moving forward. Considering her past, the traumatized Rojin might be vulnerable and develop a victim mentality. And you know, victim mentality, what is the consequences? However, she is resilient and can recover. She can learn from the past. She can forgive, even if she cannot forget. She can gain confidence and demand what others have in terms of linguistic and cultural identity and other human rights. Unification with her sisters might sound impractical. Some believe her step-siblings understand her pain, but they are powerless and have been abused themselves. Working with them might be a pragmatic solution and strengthen them to avoid their suffering. Unconditional support of her friends who understand her and her siblings' pain is essential in helping them. Through such support, they can build a trusting and mutually agreeable relationship with their friends, so together they can stop the behavior of any abuser. So those of you who have probably more knowledge about the region and the societies and my background could guess what I mean by this. Anybody can guess? Can comment so far? It's an actual patient, as you know. Anybody except for Shine? Okay. Well, that's fine. It's just a symbolic for you. In fact, if you think anybody who has been trained in certain field, they could use their field and see things in a different aspect. In fact, the scientists and physicians and think in the past they had few roles. They were not only doing their job, but they could use the model to see other things in a similar fashion. As an example, Agostino used the law for medicine and medicine for the law. It's a similar thing. I'm trying to understand the challenges of our societies via psychiatric understanding of human suffering and pain. Please, could you go to the next slide? This is, I read this in terms of what Gandhi said. He's one of the most remarkable person, in my opinion. The next one, please. Imagine you come from a region, they dictate this. Our opinion is the official opinion of our state. Constitution guarantees our opinion. No law can contradict our undisputed opinion. And I think voluntary submission to such a norm is a social sin. But could we all avoid it? If you are in the land, there is no way we can post it. And this is rule. This is the Constitution. Truly, it says that. It says if you don't believe this way, then you are in trouble. And you know how many people are in trouble. Next one. I went to a restaurant once and they asked me, how do you like your eggs? Immediately I thought, what would I say if I was a bird? I told the waiter, I said, I like my eggs free and hatched. Is it possible? He said, are you crazy? So, but is it this way? If you look at the social Darwinism, we treat other people as if they are just flies, just birds, etc. And I hope we can do better in the future. Next one, please. Now, the overview of my talk is society versus individual and Rojin that I read, and then I have it in slide forms too for, if time remains, I could go over it again. Next. Now, psychiatric view on society versus individual. And here is the pre-enlightenment, how people were treated in psychiatry. They thought people's passions drive them to choose evil, and that choice leads to inner corruption. This is the way they understood mental health. They said this is individuals' flaws. They didn't understand what is really mental health. And if somebody was in a severe condition, this is the way they treated them. They chained them and put them in cellars to keep themselves on others if they didn't know what was going on. And this is, interestingly, this is the area where colonialism was the rule in different parts of the world. Exploitation and terrorizing of native people was the norms. It's very similar. Society, individual. Next one. With Enlightenment came American Revolution, 1976, French Revolution, 1789, 1789, and Industrial Revolution around 1750. So there was some hope for change. And we see also in mental health, Benjamin Rush was one of the signers of the independence during the American Revolution, and he understood the suffering of human with mental health issues, and he thought probably it is related to some chemical imbalance or brain injuries. If you go back, please, one more time. Back. So, interestingly, at that time, Benjamin Rush was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. So, people who have other function could have also a social role too, and they didn't stay silent. So, he was among the people who were seeking freedom from Britain. Next one. Now, in the 20th century, we have the World War I, II, Cold War, East Bloc collapsed, fundamentalism, right? And there was information, internet, and the issue is with this change, could absolutism last? At the same time, in terms of psychiatric development, brain disease were considered. Dynamic psychiatry came to power for a while based on the Freudian theory. Biopsychosocial psychiatry, beginning of the 20th century. Early medication came after that, and community psychiatry, neuroscience, medications. Trauma was considered as a major issue in mental health. And then eclectic mental health, which means a broader aspect which you consider everything, as normal say today. You have to respect and then consider everything. And then coming back to that, often people who come to me, they see things from their perspective. And what I tell them is similar to what you are saying. You are absolutely right. You are correct, because you see only one aspect of the whole truth. Imagine there's a box and you look at it from one angle, but there are 5 other angles that you might not see. And this is what it is. In order to have to really understand the truth, you have to look at all aspects. And how could you look at it? I cannot see the back of my head. Somebody else could see it. Here is your flaw, as an example, if something is the back of my head. And the issue is really, when you're working together, you see things from different perspectives. Instead of eliminating each other, says you are wrong. No, you are right partially, but this is not the whole truth. And the truth nobody could know the whole truth. In fact, there's an old Persian saying by Buzurgmer, "Hame cheez ra hamegan danand," which means that everything could be known only by everybody, and everybody has not been born yet. We are making progress. New generation might have also a better understanding about truth. Next one, please. Now, in terms of, you see this, Hitler machinery of death killed over 6 million during the World War II. And so-called biological degenerates, with the awareness of academic medicine and psychiatry. And this is awakening for us as mental health professionals, as scientists, and whatever we do, really to understand the pain of the society and not to be ignorant, whatever society we are in order to prevent things like that happen. The scientists knew what's going on in Germany at that time, but either they were afraid, or they cooperated, or they were part of the machinery, unfortunately. And I hope that with progress that we have made so far, things like that never happen again. But it still is happening. It still is happening in different part of the world. Next one, please. Now, in terms of overview about what I understand from individual and mind, as a psychiatrist, what we deal with is a very simple thing, actually. Feeling, thinking, and behavior. That's it. Now, I have compared it to what society has that causes challenges. It's culture, which is similar to feeling, term of expression, ideology, which is similar to thinking, and then governing styles, how the executive branch of any country does its job. And there are different reasons that one could have difficulty with feeling, thinking, and behavior. The same, there are different reasons that the society could have cultural challenges, ideological problems, and governing problems. Next. Which are, in individual, when somebody comes to me, I usually look into 4 causes when I evaluate somebody, including life story, what has happened to the individual throughout his or her life. Then, what diseases the individual have had. This is something related to, in our field, more specific to the brain. If somebody had a stroke, somebody had trauma, somebody had schizophrenia with hallucinations. This is the thing that in terms of diseases, medical conditions. Personality or character, things that are fixed and you predictable throughout the life, as an example, being shy, being paranoid, being hostile. Those are personality traits. And then behavior, what we do in terms of action, how we manage our feeling, thinking through our behavior. Those are the things that I look at it and then come up with a conclusion and then make a summary and then tell, here is what I see. In the society, it's a similar thing that causes changes in culture, ideology, governing style. As an example, traumatic experiences in a society, disasters, earthquakes, drought, etc. Geography and natural resources are the other condition, which is similar to this. Traumatic experience is similar to life story. Culture is similar to character. Character of a society very similar to character. The cultural aspect of a society is very similar to character of an individual. And then governing style, again, similar to behavior of an individual. Next. When we talk about disease and mental disorder, it's chemical. Clearly, we are talking about a broken part. As an example, if you have kidney failure, it's a broken part. Something is wrong with the kidney. The same with the lung, the same with the heart. It's something tangible, measurable is there, and we call it a disease, a broken part. As an example, in mental health, schizophrenia, if you have seen anybody with schizophrenia talking to themselves as an example, complaining of hearing things, seeing things, paranoid. Has anybody seen people with schizophrenia? So, and really you cannot ask people, why do you hear voices? It's a chemical imbalance that we've got based on firing a certain area of the brain, that the way you have the memory or dream, this area of the brain is firing and the individual perceives that. And it takes some time for the individual to understand and not to be afraid from the perception. So it's a chemical imbalance, mainly as an example. Autism, dementia, panic, depression, those are we have found to a certain degree that are related to a broken part, which is part of the brain has been affected somehow. In the society, a broken part is, as an example, lack of resources. Something is deficient. In dementia, we see that the brain is shrinking and memory goes away. An area where there is no resources, it's similar to that, in fact. Poverty, drought, disasters, cold, heat, etc. Those are the reasons that the society could fall behind. And now, what is the intervention? Intervention, if somebody has a mental disorder with major psychiatric condition, is biological intervention, medication, social support, etc. As I said, in such a situation, it really doesn't matter if you ask somebody with dementia, just think about it. You remember, it's no weight. It is broken. It's not correctable with talking or with other intervention. It requires other serious intervention medically. Intervention for social condition, for society's condition, which has a broken part, is through technology, through financial support, industrialization, and helping people to help themselves, and not just being a missionary and try to impose certain things and then hoping that this will change the situation. Next, please. Now, in terms of dimension or characteristic of an individual, we have different abilities: IQs, height, weight, extroversion, maturity, agreeableness, initiative, altruism, self-centeredness, defiance. All of the characteristics that we all have, and we all have some of them, by the way, some more, some less. And the way we intervene with those things to guide the individual to making them aware of their strength and their weaknesses, and how to overcome the weaknesses by focusing on their strength and then giving them comfort. This is the intervention for characteristic variation in individuals. In the society, characteristics that I see are culture, belief, identity, knowledge about politics, ethics, philosophy, art, literature, etc. And the way we can intervene if there is any issues, I understand that it could be education and guidance to develop identity, to protect and build on heritage, and to develop culture and adapt to change it. If you see any the societies that have made forward, they have been adapted to change. That's why at the beginning of the slide, so those three revolutions, American, French, and Industrial Revolution, brought change, and therefore the developing world is in this position they are now. Next. The other aspect that causes problem is traumatic experience in life. As an individual, torture, physical or sexual abuse, war, hunger, neglect, and loss. Those are the things that any of us could go through, and then affects our minds, affects our feeling, thinking, and behavior. And the way we intervene is to try to reframe. As an example, if somebody was the victim on a bridge that had an earthquake, this individual developed excessive fear not to go over any bridge, as an example. The way we intervene is look at although you might have another event, another bridge, and then have an earthquake, but statistically it is very, very unlikely that you will be witnessing the same thing. But your life has been affected 99% by this, and we have to reframe the condition, try to educate, comfort, guide through a national course of recovery, assist to avoid similar encounters. As an example, if somebody goes to a bar and get drunk, and subsequently somebody take advantage of that person, bring them somewhere, and get assaulted, avoiding a similar situation, not to necessarily put yourself at risk of getting drunk without being with somebody who you can trust and rely on. Society life experiences could be terror, invasions, mass murder, genocide, bombing, assassinations. We'll go through this, and many societies have gone through this, including my smaller society, the Kurdish society, as well as the Iranian society, and the whole Middle East. If you see this have experienced various traumas similar to an individual trauma. And then America could understand the trauma by 9/11, if you recall, if you remember. It could relate to the suffering of other people who have been killed or bombed, etc. Now, what intervention do we have for that is support, understanding, international communication, in order to avoid this kind of abuse in developing society. Democratization is a key. Guidance to prevent repetition of the past. Next one. And the fourth factor that causes disturbance in an individual is the behavior of an individual regardless of any other factor, what we do in terms of action. People could engage in drug, in sex, in eating, and gambling addictions as an example. Over self-harm, violence, impulse control, etc. Those are the challenges that the individual might have. An interruption of the behavior and relapse prevention is the key in terms of helping the individual. Same thing in a society. If society has been affected by suppression, segregation, bribery, corruption, torture, etc., the intervention would be to interrupt this behavior, to ask for referendum, election, regime change if needed, and check and balance the way it is in some democratic countries. Next. I think this is the story of the Rojin that I explained. Well, how much time do I have? No. Okay. Well, we just go to the slide to get an idea. I don't, because I read it already here. These are the four sisters. Okay. Next. This is the society. Somebody just killed other people for having different opinion or identity, etc. This is the music. In the name of God, unfortunately, they do that. Okay. Next. This is the twin husbands that were sold. It's like marrying a bird and a camel together, and then we call it shtutur morals. If the societies mix things without thinking about the consequences of what they are doing. And this is what the colonial power did to some societies. Next. Here is hell and heaven. This is empty promises going to heaven. It's a joke, actually. One of my fellow citizens ended up in heaven, and in hell, in fact. It was a Kurdish peasant ended up in hell. And he saw it's full of remarkable people there. There are many artists, politicians, actors, actresses, etc. It was full of different people. The next day, when they came, the poor Kurdish peasant was alone by himself. See what happened? He had smuggled everybody to heaven, and he stayed there himself. He didn't think that he could go himself. And this is the story of smuggling. In the border area, the poor peasant and farmer, this is what they do in terms of survival. They smuggle things. They smuggle teas, sugar, etc. In fact, the Turkish government, about a month ago, killed 35 of those smugglers, young boys, and I think without accusing them of being a member of a terrorist organization, etc. They were not, in fact, they were just poor smugglers. Next. This is the son of Rojin who was hanged in public. Next. And this is the sister who was rescued and is making progress, developing gradually. Next. This is the trauma that society experienced. Many people just were bombed and killed. Next. I think I don't go over that. Instead of that, because it is too heavy maybe, I will show what my dog has taught me, if you don't mind, for the rest of 10 minutes. Is it okay?
Sure.
It says missing friend. And that friend is symbolic. It could be anything. It could be your loved one. It could be your hopes and dream. It could be your nation, it could be your people, anything could be. But it's a present, fluffy story for children of past revolutionaries. I think many people from Iran were past revolutionaries because they didn't agree with the way things were, and they don't agree with things the way they are. Therefore, revolutionaries and future evolutionists. And I hope we all become evolutionists. We can see things in a different light, hoping for improvement of a society with peaceful means instead of revolutions, bloodshed, etc. This was in that regard. So, here is at home or at the park, Fluffy misses his friend. Okay? Here is at home, here is at the park. Next one. Sad or thoughtful, mad or fearful, he cries, "Where is my friend?" Again, which is loved one, people, whatever you call it. Next. He asks humans and non-humans to help him look for his friend. So looking around to see if he can find the friend, or the hope, or the dream. Next. Some thought he needs a gift, but he was looking for something else. See, this is a Christmas gift, etc. This is not what he was looking for. Next one. Some drove him around looking for his friend. Okay, next. He asked foreign species online about his missing friend. It's a cat. I took a picture in Greece. I thought I could use this picture at some point. Okay, next. Some told him he needs a detective, so he hired one who flew all over the world to search for his friend. And while I was in there, I saw that there was somebody who was bringing his dog there. I thought this could be also useful, so I took the image. Next. We found out the friend is in jail. So he stayed in a cell to feel his friend's pain. This is his bathroom, I believe. Okay, next. He was told his friend has disrespected pig's territory. Okay, this is from Animal Farm, this image. You know Animal Farm? Has anybody seen it? Next. He said, "I do too, but who decides which territory belongs to whom?" So he has disrespected somebody else's territory too. "But I have learned from him not to do this. It's not a good idea. Or not to smell people." He goes and smells other people's dogs, and he asked me, "Why don't you do the same thing?" And I said, "I don't think they will let me do that." Next. He was told to study the history, and he did. He was sad to see most of it was written by the pigs, for the pigs. Okay, next. He decided not to give up, but to wake up. He checked with some young human friends in a meeting who wanted to change things. They voted for a visit to jail. Next. Of course, he voted for it too, you see? Next. He visited the friend behind bars. So again, I was walking with my dog, and then as I was over there, and then immediately they connected. So I said, this is a good picture for future presentation. Next. They talked and talked for hours, you see? As if really they are talking. Next. He gave the friend a goodbye kiss and promised not to rest till she is free. Again, fulfilling the dream, hope. Next. He listened carefully to everyone, from left and right. Again, Norman, when we see listening to each other, respecting each other, that's what he did too, even. You see, he turned this side, turned that side, he listens carefully to see what people say. Next. He asked his human friends to get ready and put good handmade walking shoes on and go on the street demanding freedom. Okay, this is also the idea behind this is also to self-sufficiency, to do, not to depend. So, next. They did, without causing any harm specifically. They started walking on the street and asked for freedom. This image I took it this was a strike in Greece. I may take a picture of this for my memory, or I forget later, I forget to do that. I will put it in the presentation maybe. Okay. Next. So, it worked. The friend was freed finally, they played and smelled each other happily ever after. Thank you, that's it. And I'm open for questions and comments.